You're listening to Weather with Enthusiasm. It is Saturday night, April 7th. We have something going on in this country right now that is just so magnificent. Something going on here in the Midwest. It's actually more in the plains and the mountain areas, including Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming. You could read forecast office after forecast office. All of them are really saying the same thing around there. Wind gusts over 100 miles per hour. That is occurring only in isolated areas, but wind gusts between 60 and 80 miles per hour, widespread, with sustained winds more than 40 miles per hour. Cheyenne, Wyoming, sustained winds 40 to 50 miles per hour tonight. This is stuff we don't hear about at all. Even here in the Midwest, this is stuff you would hear in tropical storms. These things occur in Alaska as well, but this is not normal at all. This is an exceptionally strong wind event around here, and some areas are getting much lighter winds. The winds will lighten up a little bit tomorrow morning, but high wind warnings are in effect throughout the day tomorrow, throughout tonight into tomorrow. Here's something else going on, which I think there's a tremendous unawareness. There's blizzard warnings in effect as well across much of these areas. Snowfall of more than a foot expected in some locations. The blizzard warnings are in effect even for places receiving significantly less. It's just the winds are so strong. Another thing that's happening is we have red flag warnings in effect, even for locations where the relative humidity is higher than the threshold of 15%, and even in locations which have minimal fuel due to the heavy snowstorm that killed. The National Weather Service says that the fuel is dead out there, so there's not much fuel for fires. The relative humidity is higher than 15%, but the winds are just so magnificent that the National Weather Service in Denver, North Platte, Nebraska, they've issued red flag warnings in effect. Actually, let's stick to Denver, Colorado. Some locations do have precipitation falling, but when the precipitation ends, there's a fire threat for there as well. Another thing we have going on is smoke has already developed and is overtaking. There's wildfires across Kansas and other locations as well, and many airports are reporting smoke with a reduction in visibility. So very intense stuff going on over there, and I'll tell you why it's not publicized. If it's not, if you've heard about it, it's publicized. If you haven't, it's not. But the reason why this is unnoticed is because the low pressure, as strong as it is, the low pressure system itself, when you look on the map, you'll see 29.2. Perhaps it was stronger earlier. This is certainly a strong storm system, but the barometric pressure and the winds do not match up. These winds really would be a representative of a much stronger type of low pressure system, something more like 28.4, this is, tropical storm material, and just the low pressure on any of the computer models on the map. The computer models advertise what's going on really in a phenomenal way. To actually get the reported wind gusts, it's a little bit harder, but so it's more comprehensive just to look at the model, and the models are fairly accurate, especially the higher resolution models, and it's just something magnificent. The way I figured this out was by looking at windy.com and looking at the next 10-day snow totals across the U.S. The 10-day forecast snow totals across the U.S. For the first time, you'll see actually very little snow across this country, even across the upper Midwest, very little. But when you get to Nebraska, in portions of South Dakota, areas around there, you'll see significant snow, the 10-day forecast total. So you put it back to 5 days, there's still significant snow. You put it back to 24 hours, and amazingly, there's still significant snow. All of that snow is occurring right now. And you go and you look it up. up. That's the attention-grabbing part, is the snow, the heavy snowfall accumulations. It guides you to the National Weather Service forecast discussions, and then you find out about these 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts being spoken about in forecast discussions of the National Weather Service, but it's also being advertised on the news in Denver, Colorado, in the weather part. You have at the airport right now, wind gusts are super light, actually, only in the teens or even less than that. But areas in the western portions of Denver, Colorado, you have very powerful wind gusts right now. I believe they're in the 70s, and some wind gusts will be approaching 100, even past 100 miles per hour as we go through the night. By tomorrow morning, the winds are expected to lighten up slightly, and then by tomorrow evening at sunset, the winds completely come to an end. Now, historical wind events, for it to be historical, apparently for that area of our country, you need winds to be 120 mile per hour wind gusts. It sounds awfully high, but that's what they say. That's what we have going on in our country right now. Just totally remarkable stuff. It is a heart-racing experience just to read about these winds, I'll tell you that much. We have severe thunderstorms that developed across Nebraska earlier today. It also affected other states as well. And it's a line of severe thunderstorms. And I don't really know if there's much difference between the wind gusts in the thunderstorms and the wind gusts outside of the thunderstorms. The strong winds, what's happening right now is you have strong winds up in aloft, which have come down to the surface, and that's why the winds are so strong. A lot of times in severe thunderstorms, that's also what you get. So we already have that, even without the storm. We have, as we mentioned before, we have blizzard warnings for a reduction of visibility to less than 1/4 mile. We have a dust storm, an expected dust storm to take place across the plains, with visibility dropping to less than 1/4 mile. That's the equivalent of a blizzard. We also have visibility being reduced due to fire smoke from wildfires that have developed across Kansas due to these very powerful winds. We have a line of severe thunderstorms that developed across Nebraska earlier today. But, you have to wonder, there's really not much difference between the severe thunderstorm warning areas and these high wind warning regarding the wind gusts. The timing is probably a little bit different, and that's about it. We have blizzard warnings in effect. Cheyenne, Wyoming, Scottsbluff, Nebraska. A blizzard warning for 6 to 12 inches of snow, tells us the National Weather Service of Cheyenne, Wyoming. There is a possibility of the precipitation changing over to rain at some point tomorrow. The National Weather Service is careful to point out that they only have high confidence in the wind forecast. So one of these forecast offices pointed out that this is such a dynamic storm system that if there's even a slight change in any variable, any condition, the whole forecast changes for a number of cities. We have highways that are expected to close overnight due to the strong winds, which will be blowing over. The National Weather Service says the winds will be strong enough to blow over high-profile vehicles. Part of this is due to something called a mountain wave, and that's where these strong winds, the way they interact with the mountains just intensifies things. But a lot of this is occurring away from the mountains. The 100-mile-per-hour thing, that's associated with the mountain wave. But we have wind gusts of 60 to 80 miles per hour separate from the mountain thing. So, yeah, just really, really strong winds. In Cheyenne, Wyoming, again, 40 to 50 mile per hour sustained winds. This is tropical storm material based upon wind. Barometric pressure does not reflect this type of wind, a tropical storm force wind, sustained winds. They'll use the terminology every now and then, hurricane force wind gusts, but there really is no such thing. Hurricanes have a sustained wind of 74 miles per hour. It has to be sustained. Now, I do want to point out that on Monday, we have a solar eclipse occurring in many locations. This will be a complete 100% solar eclipse. Experts are saying that if you are in an area which is only getting 99% totality, you are in an area where the sun will be 10,000 times brighter than if you're in a place with total 100% totality. So it's very important. People who actually want to experience the solar eclipse, it's actually very important to be in a city which has 100% totality, not 99% totality. It's nothing. If it's totally nothing, you have to be in a city which is 100% totality. Indianapolis, Indiana. On the map, Paducah, Kentucky. If Paducah, Kentucky was a city which is right on that line, and Paducah, Kentucky happens to also be a city where the Weather Prediction Center is advertising clear skies. So that's going to be the closest city with higher confidence of clear skies. A lot of people, I know a lot of Chicagoans are going to Indianapolis to view the solar eclipse, and things hopefully will work out over there. But if you look at the Weather Prediction Center, there does seem to be a risk of high clouds in that area. Paducah, Kentucky seems there's like a little dome of clear skies over Paducah, Kentucky. So also there's a little area in Texas, but generally there's high clouds until you get to northern Maine. In that location, you could always look this up at the Weather Prediction Center, and it's something which will be occurring Monday afternoon. It's the first time in 1,193 years for Indianapolis, Indiana. And it's going to be a long time before something like this happens in Chicago. Chicago is only getting, again, 94% totality, but so it's really not going to do it. And if you're in an area which is getting 99% totality, which I believe is not Paducah, Kentucky. I believe they're getting 100% totality. But if 99% totality, the sun is 10,000 times brighter than 100% totality. That's what the experts tell us. So you could look again at the Weather Prediction Center. It has everything over there. And I wish everybody a wonderful week. And stay safe. And a big warm-up is expected this week across the middle parts of the country. For Chicago, temperatures will come very close to 70. You know, getting into Tuesday, winds are expected to become south and even southwest, which is very good for even the east, even for the lakeside counties. However, I should point out that I have not read the forecast discussion for Chicago yet. So a lot of times, even if there is a south-southwest wind, somehow the lake still manages to produce a lake breeze. That happens sometimes, and that's something to be careful about. Usually it doesn't. Once you have a westerly component to the wind, usually we're pretty safe. I've been focused more on the National Weather Services by this windstorm and snowstorm, which they have lower confidence about. You've been listening to Weather with Enthusiasm. This podcast can be found on almost every platform where podcasts are available. We have two things going on. We have evaporative cooling and we also have dynamic cooling, and the two are coming together to produce a major snowstorm in the deep south. The only time you could blame cold air on climate change is when it's a result of the stratosphere warming, which is what causes all the Arctic air to come down south. The way to get a 6-inch snowstorm here in the Midwest and in the Southern Plains has always been you need 3 ingredients. It's hard to believe the numbers that are being forecasted. Several additional feet of snow is expected by Monday morning. Yes! Hey, we have a special guest on our show. What is your name?
Kitabis.
27.1 barometric pressure. Feet of snow are falling in Japan.
Oh my God.
That's a time of celebration. Just Google Weather with Enthusiasm and they're all going to come up.